You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to where nightmares come to life, where all the horrors of the universe meet in one place. It is the Horror Ramblings Podcast, with me, Lester, and of course, the amazing Steven. How are you doing today, Steven?
I'll swallow your soul.
I felt that was appropriate.
That is appropriate, very much so.
I'm doing all right.
How's everything in your neck of the woods? I figured I should ask. I thought we were going to get blown away last night.
That's that we kind of had the same thing going on around here. It's still a bit windy. The sun is out, so it's passing. But yeah, storms have been kind of rough around here the last day or so. So hopefully everyone out there is fine. I don't know where the storms are at this point in time when you're listening. So hopefully they're moved on and everyone's okay.
Yeah, we just had some friends, actually. They had a tornado come through their town. Luckily, they're okay. They don't have power, and their fence got a little messed up, but they're good. So I'm glad they're at least okay.
Yeah.
So
No, this weather's been climate change, man. I'm just gonna leave it there. I'm not gonna say much more. It's a real thing.
So I have to do something real quick. Just kind of do a recap of this last weekend. You and Katrina released a Puppet Master episode. I was a little busy over the weekend. I got to go to Horror Hound. Wasn't exactly, as extensive as it normally is because of the fact that we didn't get VIP this year.
Right.
Did a little bit of networking, talked to some people. But I had to tell you a really funny story. So we met Dee Wallace, and she is just wonderful. She is like the nicest woman. And she said a few things that kind of resonated with me a little bit. One of those was that she considers herself to be the Scream Queen of Scream Queens. But she wasn't cocky about it. Like, she was really modest about it. She's like, when I think about it, I think I've been in more horror films than any other actress. She's like, if you think about it, she's like, so I guess that sort of makes me a Scream Queen, maybe the Scream Queen of Scream Queens because of how many horror films I've been in. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, she made a good point. And we didn't have her on our list, which kind of hurts my feelings now that I think about it.
Because she's not initially the Scream Queen you think about, but then when you start thinking about the horror movie she's been in, she's been in a lot of classics. Cujo, Howling, Critters,
And I had told her that. We had talked about Critters and, how much we loved her career. And I talked about her in Cujo because Cujo is one of my favorite movies. And she did tell me a few really funny things. I want to share them just real quick before we get into the meat of stuff. One thing she told me, so obviously for parts of Cujo, they used a guy in a costume. But they also used 13 different dogs to play Cujo. And the thing that I thought was funny, she said that there were certain parts in the movie where they actually had to tie the dogs' tails to their legs because the man that trained the dogs for the movie used toys to train them. So whenever the dog was attacking in the movie, the dog was trying to get a toy.
Oh, okay.
And she said the dogs just had a great time with it. Everybody else is screaming, but dogs think that they're all just playing. So the dogs were wagging their tails because they were happy. Well, obviously, a vicious dog that's trying to eat you is not going to be wagging its tail and be excited. So they had to do that. And I thought that was just kind of a funny little tidbit.
Yeah.
But another thing that she mentioned, and this one you'll get a kick out of, she was talking about Critters. And she said when they were filming Critters, she said it was really hard for us to keep a straight face in certain scenes because when the critters would roll on to the scene, you would, in the movie, you see them roll up and everybody's terrified. But behind the scenes, she said the director would yell, "Roll them in." And when he would yell that, there were all these guys that had these little critter balls in their arms, and you know how little kids bowl with rolling the bowling ball? That's what these guys would do. And she said it was so hard to keep a straight face because, you know, you're in a horror movie, but it was like watching, you know, huge babies roll bowling balls down the way. But she was a gem. She was wonderful. We didn't get to talk for a long time, but in the brief time that we did talk, yeah, she was wonderful. And I have to say too, I also met the actor who plays Art the Clown.
Yeah.
We actually got to see him in his makeup.
Nice.
He was doing photo ops as Art. We didn't get to do that because I didn't know. If I would have known, then we would have done it. But he was walking through the convention to go get declowned, as they all said, before he signed autographs. And, you know, in the classic Art style, everybody was cheering for him, and he had that big smile, and he was blowing kisses to everybody and everything else. But we got up there to meet him. He's very soft-spoken. The people in front of us, one of them had a Little Shop of Horrors shirt on, and as soon as he saw it, he went, "Feed me," and he was talking about how he loved the movie. And I got a picture with him, and he had his little hat, he had his little horn, and Samantha was with me, and he asked if she wanted to be in the picture, and she's like, "You can let him just be in it." She's like, "Horror movies really aren't necessarily my thing," and he honked his horn at her. And he was like, "Well, then get out of it." And, you know, making jokes and everything. And he was extremely starstruck. He was telling us that he met they had people from Cobra Kai there.
Oh, nice.
A bunch of people. And he got to meet them. And he was in his Art the Clown makeup. And, like, he was making one of the women really nervous. And he was like, "Please, that girl could kick my ass." But it was cool to see him get, you know, kind of starstruck by him.
Yeah.
But, yeah, super nice guy. And it just goes to show people in horror movies are some of the nicest people you'll ever meet, because he was just wonderful human being, plays a complete monster.
Yeah.
And I got to admit, I think I did butter him up a little bit, because I told him what I've told you. I think Art the Clown has sort of captured that magic that 80s slashers captured when they initially came out, and he's already become an icon because of it. And I told him that, and he was legitimately like, I think I got to him just a little bit, because I'm sure he's been told it, but maybe I just said it a little bit differently than some other people have.
Sure.
But yeah, great time at the convention. We missed out on Bruce Campbell again, because it's just, you have to get a ticket online to wait in line to see him. That's how busy he is.
Good God.
Yeah. So I think the next convention we go to, we're going to get some VIP passes. They do have Platinum VIP now, but that also entails like your hotel room and everything else, and those tickets are like $900. Yeah. So if we can get one and get a hotel room and then maybe get another one cheaper, then I could see that being justified, because it does give you parking and everything, like you're guaranteed a parking spot and everything else. So it's nice in that regard. And you get a bunch of merch. And I got to meet Uncle Lloyd, and that was phenomenal. We were sitting there standing there getting our picture taken, and he was telling the person with the camera, "Take your time. Lester's grabbing my ass. It feels kind of nice." I tell you, he is something else, and his Thug Life hoodie that he had on just made my day. So,
yeah, I saw that in the picture, and I thought, all right.
But yeah, all the people from Troma, it is completely true. All the people at Troma are so freaking nice. They're so wonderful. And I actually found, on another random note real quick, just some Horror Hound, reviews and news. I've been looking for a McFarlane Toys Freddy Krueger. They have these, they're these figures that they came out with back in the 90s. They're, it was a whole movie collection. It's escaping me right at the moment. But it's got the figure, and they've got like a poster thing that comes with them as well. Like, you know what I'm talking about, don't you?
I have a Bride of Chucky one. I think that's from the same line, because it was Chucky, Tiffany, and then the Bride of Chucky poster on kind of a stand.
Yeah, and
that was
the stand,
very specific. Yeah,
the stand kind of looks like a skeletal thing. Yeah. So those are kind of hard to find, I believe. because I've had a hard time finding them anyways. But
yeah, I haven't seen one in quite a while.
yeah, so they did they're doing a new run of them, but they're going to be kind of different.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time when they came out in the 90s, they were some of the most detailed figures you could get.
Yeah.
And they had a Freddy one, so I was able to find one. And, you know, sometimes I'll haggle with the people. I didn't even haggle. I just had to have it. So I was just like, here's my money. Take it. I need this. Thank you. But, yeah, we had a good time. And one of these days, maybe if the show gains a little more traction, I'd love to set up a booth at one of those. We could sell some merch and even record right there on the convention floor.
Yeah, it'd be
But
amazing.
I think that would be just awesome. There was another podcast there that I had, you know, I had gotten to talk with. So they've been doing it for a while, but I networked with them a little bit. But yeah, I would love to have the opportunity to do that. So
For sure.
but enough about me. Anything new with you before we get into the guts of things?
Nothing at the moment. I felt like maybe I had something, but I think my memory's been kind of shoddy trying to remember stuff, and there's nothing that's coming to mind. So I'm gonna say no, and if it occurs to me along the way, I'll decide whether or not I want to interrupt and bring it up.
If it's important enough to interrupt, then it's something major.
Sure. I mean, there's things to look forward to over the next couple of weeks. Let's just say that. How about that?
I think that's fair. Fair. Now, we have a very exciting movie coming out this month, and it's going to be one of our topics of discussion today, which is the everlasting Evil Dead franchise. Let's just put it out there. Evil Dead is just fucking awesome. I'm just going to put it that way. It's just awesome.
It's one of a kind, honestly. Even when you think of the things that it does in it and things that you could say, well, it's kind of like this or kind of like that, it really isn't. Things are more like Evil Dead than Evil Dead is more like something else, if you will. So it stands on its own 2 feet, and I feel like even if you try to replicate it, it's obvious what you're replicating.
Yeah. It's like nothing catches that magic that Evil Dead got. But before we talk about the movies, I just want to quickly bring up Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell.
Okay.
Because, you know, these guys grew up together. They've been friends, I mean, lifelong friends. And Sam Raimi had an idea for a movie, told his buddy Bruce, I would love for you to be in this. Bruce accepted. They abused the shit out of him. But they made movie history. And even to this day, the two of them are still just the best of friends. Anything that Sam Raimi touches, if he can get Bruce Campbell to at least have a cameo in it, then he does. I mean, look at Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. He directed it. He had Bruce Campbell come in and join it. And Bruce Campbell, I've even heard him say, he's like, if I ever had to do another Evil Dead movie with anybody else and they put me through the stuff that Sam puts me through, I'd punch them.
Yeah.
He's like, I can take the abuse from Sam because they've been friends that long.
Yeah.
And I really like Sam Raimi as a director. I'll admit his film Drag Me to Hell, the first time that I watched it, it was kind of a miss for me.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know if I just wasn't in the right headspace. I have revisited it, and I thought, you know what? This is a lot better than I thought it was initially. But just there's two things that I think make Evil Dead so great, and that's Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell. However, you know, this new film, they're not in it per se, but they are a big part of it. They're producers, and I believe on the Evil Dead remake that came out a few years back, they were involved. I know Bruce Campbell had a cameo in it, and that just shows that you need them, because from what I can tell, this new film is phenomenal, and the remake that came out a few years back was also phenomenal. But I wanted to kind of talk about Bruce and Sam just a tiny bit, but we can get into the movies because we're here to talk about the movies.
No, for sure. I mean, to my understanding, they do own the franchise. Like they have the rights to it, so therefore anything that has to do with Evil Dead has to go through them in the first place. So I think they're always involved in anything Evil Dead, which is a plus. You know, you want the people who crafted it and created it to be involved in some way because you know it'll always be on track. They're not going to go over here or over there and do something wildly out of character for the franchise. So
I also think
that's what I love about it.
Yeah, and I also think they're really good negotiators because it seems like the problem lately with a lot of franchises is multiple people own them, and everyone wants to make more money than the other person, and that's where the problem lies. From my understanding, they've negotiated pretty good deals that are like, look, this is our percentage, this is your percentage, everybody's still going to make money.
Sure.
Because a lot of people seem to forget that if you can keep the original people that created it, the people that know what the hell they're doing with it, involved and compensate them fairly, you're going to make a lot more. Even if your percentage that you're getting is not as high, you're still going to make more. It'd be like it's like if I were to make a movie by myself and it only made $1 million. Okay, I get let's say I get 100% of that $1 million. Cool.
Yeah.
Or I make a movie with you and we make $10 million and I get 50% and you get 50%. Guess what? We did a lot better by swallowing our pride and going, okay. I don't think Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi look at percentages like that. I think they're just like, look, here's how it should be.
Yeah.
So, but enough of that boring talk about percentages. Ugh.
But it does make sense. I think that they are more concerned about the integrity of the franchise than the bottom line of $1. So they want to make sure that even if with Evil Dead Rise, from everything that we've seen, this is a brand new take. This is something wholly unique to the franchise. I wouldn't really say that the original kind of treaded similar ground, but they posited the story in a different way to where you're kind of telling the same story, but in a different aspect or a different way. And with this, they're still allowing that. It's like, okay, well, what if we're taking it outside of the cabin and we're moving it to a city, which we've never seen. We're putting it in a high rise. Never seen that. How does the story play out? But you're still maintaining those elements of Evil Dead and the Deadites and things of that nature. So I'm really curious to see in Evil Dead Rise if we'll get elements that would necessarily seem odd in a high rise. Like the one thing in particular is the camera shot, or the unseen demon, if you will, that just barrels through the forest coming to the cabin. Now, how would you do that? I mean, I can see it going up the stairs and through and everything. That would be kind of neat, but where's it coming from? Would that character even be in the film? I don't know. So it's a good question to ponder.
And
about.
I've always thought about the demon and the camera and everything, and it's to me, I've always just seen it as this bodiless entity. I guess, and I like it that way because I just saw a clip from to talk about another film just real quick. I just saw a clip from the new Children of the Corn film, and they actually, the children worship this thing that lives between the stalks, and in the original film you never see that. In this film, they actually show it. It's this physical thing that they've created, and I mean it's cool looking, but it kind of killed it for me.
I can see that.
It's like sometimes I feel like there's got to be some unknown. You got to keep a little bit of mystery to it. I think personally in Evil Dead Rise, if they were to show it go through like the heating vents in the building,
oh, that would be awesome.
Because to me that shows like it doesn't matter where you are, you're not safe. Like I kind of like the feel of that, and it adds that like claustrophobic feel as well. So
plus that would show that it can adapt to any situation. It doesn't have to it can go small, it can be big, it'd be whatever it takes. So
yeah,
that would be a great idea. I kind of hope they did that now. I just don't want to see that just banging around.
I mean, just imagine like this, and it would be cool if it did, like you heard like the banging around and everything, because that would just show that it's learning, like it's somewhere new, but it's learning.
Yeah.
Like, that'd be a cool twist.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But
so, anyway, Evil Dead, the original, we're talking about, the first one came out in 1981, 1981. And so, obviously, filmed around 1980, 79. I know that there's conflicting reports on that from what I hear from behind the scenes. So, somewhere in there, that probably took them a while. And they actually shot in Morristown, Tennessee, which is a good ways away from where I'm at, but it's still within the state in which I live. So I've always wanted to go see if I could find the cabin, but I think it's been demolished by this point from what I understand. So I can't swear to that or not, but I'm almost positive I've heard that. But yeah, like you said, they were college friends, just wanted to do a simple little indie film, and a lot of what they did in this, I think that's another thing that this film, if you don't know a lot of the behind the scenes stuff about it, a lot of the stuff they did in this film was revolutionary at the time. You know, no one had shot a film like this. No one had used camera angles in this way. And a lot of the prosthetic makeup, the stop motion animation stuff that they even did, I mean, this was wholly unique at that time, especially for an indie filmmaker. So he broke a lot of ground, Sam Raimi, in doing this film, and really set the bar high for anybody wanting to do like an indie film. You know what I'm saying? So... And it got rave reviews. I think they showed it at the Cannes Film Festival in 1982. Stephen King gave like his stamp of approval, had like a little blurb that they used on so many things. And it became this phenomenon that kind of started small and people kind of caught wind of it. But for me, I didn't see this film, believe it or not, until after I had seen Army of Darkness and Evil Dead 2. I watched all these films backwards because a buddy of mine, he was a fan, and I think Army of Darkness was getting ready to come out, and he's like, "Oh, dude, we got to go check out this movie." Now, I'd seen a trailer for it, and I thought, okay, this looks kind of fun, and I wanted to go see it. But when I went to the theater with him to watch it, I could tell I was missing some elements. I was like, oh, I'm in the middle of something, because the movie starts with this, luckily a recap of the events from part 2. And I was like, okay. And then once I realized where we were, I was like, shit, now I've got to go watch this other one. So then that weekend we watched Evil Dead 2, and I was like, okay, now I'm seeing where things start to piece together. And then of course the ending of part 2 doesn't match up to the beginning of part 3. So I was like, well, now I'm confused. And then even if you go back to part 1, because you see where part 2 begins, part 1 also doesn't quite line up, but it does, and we'll get to that. So I was confused watching them backwards because I was like, well, this doesn't line up with where that one ended, and I'm confused. But it doesn't matter as far as I'm concerned. I think they're all enjoyable in their own right, because starting with part 1, I wouldn't say where, kind of what I think we mentioned kind of off mic, we're talking about a franchise that started hardcore horror. And I would really be hard pressed to find any comedic elements in the first film. There may be some there, but I couldn't tell you what it is. And then when you get to part 2, they kind of changed the format a little bit and tweaked how they were going about it. But part 1 was... The original was a straight up horror film, in my opinion. I cannot think of any element to it that was just like, holy shit, this is, that's kind of funny, or, I do like that because that was humorous. It was full on horror and some of the gnarliest stuff you'd ever seen on screen at that point.
I do think by today's standards, there could be a few things that people might have a chuckle about, but I think it would be more, and this is why I think this film still holds up. There are some horror films from the 70s and the 80s that you watch them and you just laugh because the film's dead serious, and it's just the ideas, the concepts are just enough to make you go, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Evil Dead, on the other hand, anytime I've ever heard anybody like chuckle about anything that happens in the first film, you look at their face, you can tell that they're chuckling because they don't know what else to do, because they're uncomfortable. And I think that is the thing that made this film so amazing in the first place, and still makes it amazing today. There's an element to it that even when things are just going crazy in it, or the craziest part of the film all the way down to when nothing's happening, there's a sense of unease. And it makes you extremely uncomfortable while you're watching it. And you stay uncomfortable. Sam Raimi's great at that. He's great at keeping you in a level of suspense.
Yeah.
And not like, I'm not even going to say like full blown, like on the edge of your seat suspense, but like just a feeling of uneasiness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really works for this film. And like you said, this film was doing things at the time that nobody was expecting, and it did some brutal things. I mean, just to bring up a thing that I know a lot of people have talked about, I didn't know trees could rape people.
Yeah, that was that was one of those scenes that when you see it, you cannot unsee that, and it kind of sticks with you for a minute because you're like, holy shit, did I just see that? And you did.
Which I know we'll probably talk about it as we progress through here, but I just want to bring it up. The remake that came out a few years ago, it redid that scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think that scene could make me uncomfortable again. But damn if that movie, that scene in that film made me so just the original film, it's the actual whole tree. It's the physical tree.
Yeah.
In the remake a few years back, it's like this snake-like thing. It's like the tree has this like separate part of it. And the trees hold this girl in place, and they open her legs, and this thing like slithers up her leg. And you see it from, I mean, you don't see that area, but you see like she's got a dress on or something. And you just see it slither on in. Mm-hmm. And she's trying to let out a scream the whole time it's going in. And when it finally, I think it even makes a sound when it goes in all the way. And then she lets out this scream.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not even doing it justice explaining it. Like, it's just, I'm sitting there and I remember, part of the language, it's a horror podcast. People know we cuss on it sometimes. First time I physically and out loud, I went, what the fuck was that? Because it was heavy.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah, for sure.
And the original, just the blood and the gore and everything, just the films continue to up the gore factor, up the shock value. And I know we've talked before about how shock value is just overdone, but Evil Dead just has a way of making it work.
Yeah. And even the creation of the Deadites, those are characters that the way it's portrayed, I feel, is something that if anybody tries to do anything similar, it doesn't work the same because it's a possessed person and they're just evil, cruel, manipulative little beings that just fuck with people. And I think that's one of the beauties of the original film and even the sequel is the scene where you have a character under the floorboards, playing to their sympathies, being like, oh, please help me, and just fucking with you. And you know that it's just a trick, but they get into your head and you're just kind of, struggling with it, trying to figure out, it's like, okay, so am I nuts? Am I crazy? Are they not possessed? Because they're not dead. They're just possessed. And in all honesty, there's never been a situation, at least I can't think of a situation, where you've had a Deadite come back from or someone being possessed coming back from it. It's like once you're possessed, you're done. I mean, your entire city. I mean, you might as well just be dead. So
I mean, honestly.
Yeah. So it's a very fascinating character or idea for a villain because you don't know how to cure anyone of that or fix that, and how they possess you is almost kind of unclear. It's almost like it just gets you.
Yeah.
And you just have to pay attention to the people around you because one minute you're okay and the next minute, you're possessed. Deadite got you. And it's just so quick that you have no time to really react or assume who's going to be possessed. It's just like, boom, there it is.
Yeah.
And
I do know that they sort of showed, in a sense, how to defeat the possession in that. Here I go talking about the remake a few years back. It's a solid film. I don't care what anybody says. It's solid, and I wish it would have gotten a sequel, but shit happens. I understand it. The thing with that film is the girl that ends up getting possessed at the beginning and the one that's stuck under the floorboards and everything. They kill her.
yeah.
They kill her, and that drops the curse, and then they bring her back. But she still technically had to die. It's like whatever this is, it attaches itself to you, and it's there for the long haul. It wants you to spread it until you can't anymore because you've died.
Sure.
So, another thing, just I don't know why this just popped into my mind, but another thing I just want to say about Evil Dead and about films in general. Evil Dead is one of the only franchises I know where the Deadites have changed over the years in their appearance.
Yeah.
And even when the TV show was on, Ash vs. Evil Dead, they went back to the older style, well, original style, I guess I should say, of what the Deadites looked like.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to these newer films, they've kind of gotten a more refined look. There's not as much, it's more makeup than prosthetic.
Yeah.
But people aren't really all that pissed about it.
I think in essence it still looks like a Deadite, so I think that's why it's more accepting.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I really respect about these films, is that they were able to do that, because, you look at other films like Halloween or Friday the 13th or even Nightmare on Elm Street. People have their favorite version of that character.
Mm-hmm.
They have their favorite look. Some people are like, oh, well, the scariest looking Freddy we ever got was from part 2. Jason wasn't cool until he got the hockey mask. I hate him when he had the sack on his head. They should have just kept the Captain Kirk mask for Michael. And that's fine for people to have, to have different opinions on that. By all means, we all have our preferences of what we like. But it's like with Evil Dead, if you were to look at somebody and go, what do you like your Deadites to look like? Most people are just like, I fucking love all the Deadites.
Yeah. There's not one specific design that I could look at and be like, oh, yeah, that one. They all feel like they exist within the same universe.
Yeah. And even when you get the more like monstrous looking Deadites, it's still, to me, it's just like, it's more Deadites.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, how do I put this? The best way I could describe Evil Dead being successful is, I think it throws 3 things together that people love. It throws slashers together in a sense, because the Deadites are kind of like slashers to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
They're intelligent. Possession. People think possession is fantastic in horror films.
Yeah.
And in a way, Deadites are sort of like zombies in the fact that it takes a lot to stop them.
See, I've kind of viewed the zombie-esqueness of them, like trying to describe them, that would be where I would start, but I also feel like that's not accurate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there's just a lot more that there's not a zombiness to them, or at least in the traditional sense. So I don't know, that's a hard line to really get into,
Now, when I think of them as zombies, this is going to sound weird. When I think of them as zombies, I don't think of them as a dead person that's come back to life. I think of them as more of the sense of, how do I put it? When somebody gets bit by a zombie, but they're still alive, and they like start to change.
All right.
Because they've kind of shown that in movies, and not every zombie movie does it, but I appreciate the movies that do that. Somebody's changing and they're fighting the urge, and then all of a sudden they've kind of started to get ridiculously strong. Have you ever seen the movie Overlord?
Name is not ringing a bell, so I'm gonna say no.
Do yourself a favor, look it up. It's a zombie movie, and it's not the traditional sense. These people they give one of their friends this serum. I think he gets shot, if I remember right, and he just starts to go nuts.
Mm-hmm.
He's still alive in essence. He still knows who he is, but he becomes hyper violent and everything else. So I guess as far as comparing them to zombies, I guess I would say they're like demonic zombies, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I think that would be accurate to a degree.
Yeah, and I think that's what has helped Evil Dead withstand the test of time. It's like slashers meets these supernatural beings almost, and people just eat it up. And it's also the fact that there's a lot of creative deaths in these films, and you have to have some creativeness with your death scenes. Yeah,
for sure. There's a lot of I would probably say the stuff in the remake are a lot more vicious and make you more uncomfortable type scenes. But in all honesty, the first movie did have some moments that would just kind of make you, outside of the tree rape. I'm thinking there was a scene, I think, where it was Cheryl had stabbed Linda in the ankle with a pencil. Do you remember that? Ah, God, it just...
Still uncomfortable to this day, yeah.
Yeah, you just watch it and you're just like, no, God. And it's just how it... Because I'm almost positive, granted my memory of it is a little wispy at best. I do own them. I have seen them. Bear with me. But I'm almost positive they stick with it for a minute. It's not just a simple stab and then that's it. And you're like, cut away. It's like a stab and then just digging it in.
Yeah.
And you're just like, stop. That kind of thing. So when you play with it for a minute, it just makes it even worse.
Right? And the fact that they show the Deadites get enjoyment out of it the way they do, that makes it even worse.
Yeah.
And to kind of piggyback off of what you just said about, the newer ones having a lot more gore factor, I think a lot of that boils down to when the original Evil Dead came out, the gore and the violence in that were, at that time, comparable to being just as bad as it was when the remake came out.
Yeah.
Audiences become more and more desensitized and things get more and more violent, but I think it's kind of, by comparison, when those films came out, that was, at the time, the worst you could possibly do on a screen. A scene, talking about the remake real quick, that still sticks with me. One scene in particular is when she's down in the crawl space. One of the people have gotten down there, and I'm terrible with names, but she's possessed. And she takes a box cutter and she lifts it up and she slices her tongue down the middle. And she goes, "Kiss me, you little whore."
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm a terrible human being, because I'll admit this. There's another scene in the movie where it shows, and I love that Evil Dead does this, and I love that they have stayed consistent with the appearance of it. So when Bruce Campbell's character, when his hand gets possessed, it starts to show like these black veins like travel up through it, and he cuts it. In the Evil Dead remake from a few years ago, there's a girl who starts to get the black veins up through her arm, and she takes an electric knife, cuts her arm off. I love that they stayed consistent, but I'm in a theater full of people watching this scene, and it comes to the scene, her arm is just hanging by a couple pieces of skin. She's like, "I got it," and her arm falls off and hits the floor. I chuckled. in that horrible moment full of gore and blood, just her arm just hitting the floor. I couldn't help but chuckle, because it was just a morbid, funny thing to me. And if I go to hell for it, I go to hell for it. But to this day, I think about that scene, and it's funny to me. So
I don't think it's that uncommon to have those moments where we find something that should be horrifying to be funny. I think we've all done it at some point or another. So I think you're fine. I think if you're going to hell for it, we all are. So
now, Army of Darkness was the first one that you saw.
Yes.
So I want to talk about that, but I have to tell you, because it's really funny. The first Evil Dead that I actually got to see was the first one. My uncle rented it. We rented the first one. They did not have the second one. I don't think it was available at the time. But they had Army of Darkness as well. So we rented Army of Darkness. And I freaking loved Army of Darkness. Army of Darkness, to me, was just... It was comedy heavy. And it felt like more of an action movie to me. It was like an action horror comedy.
Sure.
Like that's how I pictured it. But it goes to show, and I think this is where people are having issues a little bit, and where I think they're making the right decision on doing this movie away from the this one coming out away from the cabin and everything. Army of Darkness proved to me Bruce Campbell is the Evil Dead. Like he's the hero of it.
Yeah.
And you love to watch him. It's here I go. Get your shots ready. It's like Robert Englund as Freddy. It's hard to see somebody else do it. And Army of Darkness really proved that to me, at least, because I love his entire performance in all of them, but Army of Darkness in particular. There's something about the way that Bruce Campbell is in that movie.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love it. And you've got the skeleton army, and you've got an evil version of Bruce, a Deadite version of Ash come to life.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know, that's the movie that sold me on the Evil Dead. Like, it legitimately is.
The film is interesting for me personally, not just for being the first one that I watched, but this is one of the only films or film franchises that classifies under horror that my dad will actually watch. He is not a horror fan by any means, but it surprised me one day because I know we had watched it before in the past. But there was a time that he was over, or he had come to visit, and I think it was during a Thanksgiving dinners. Big, family was around, whatever. I can't remember what it was. But we were just looking for something to watch, just kind of turning it on in the background. And Army of Darkness, he spotted it. And he's like, you remember that movie with and he was describing it to me, and I was like, oh, Army of Darkness. And it just blew my mind that he was just so excited to want to watch this movie again that I gladly popped it in for him. I was like, holy hell yeah, here you go. And he just enjoyed every minute of it. And I even showed him the first episode of Ash vs. Evil Dead. I was like, if you want to watch more of his exploits. And I do remember him watching Evil Dead 2 because I knew it leaned more into the darker comedy. So I felt like he could still kind of appreciate it. Now, granted, I still think he would prefer Army of Darkness over Evil Dead 2, but he did get his chuckles in where I saw it. Because the Three Stooges, if we're gonna talk about it, he loves the Stooges, and obviously Sam Raimi is a big Stooges fan, and we see that in Evil Dead 2, we see that in Army of Darkness, I'm sure elsewhere, and in all of his productions. If you don't know, anybody who doesn't know this, you're clearly not a Raimi fan. You'll see in the credits the title Fake Shemp, which is a play on the idea of this person filling in the Stooges from way back when. So it's essentially a title for a stand-in. Like in Darkman, Bruce Campbell was titled Fake Shemp because he was the final shot in the film. It's some kind of running gag they have, and you'll see it actually in the Army of Darkness credits too. So I found that to be an interesting element that can draw certain people in. They sense that familiarity of Stooges, and you're like, oh, I like that. So the sensibilities are there, and then that's why I enjoyed it. I honestly feel that wholeheartedly. So,
it's funny too that you say that, because growing up, a friend of mine, his father was a huge Three Stooges fan. And whenever we would be over there, we would watch the Three Stooges. And I'm actually a Three Stooges fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has a lot to do with my love for Sam Raimi films in general, because there are a lot of Stooge elements in a lot of his films. And I've always looked at Ash as like the son of one of the Stooges that nobody knew about.
Right.
So, like, I don't know, he even in the series, which just to kind of say real quick, the series started out as a movie. The guys that wrote the series were going to write a movie, and it just kept growing, and growing, and they were like, this can't be a movie, this has to be a series. So they turned it into a series. And to me, Ash is really just he's everyone. I mean, not to sound mean to Ash, but there's certain parts in the series where you're like, man, Ash is a little skeezy, just a little bit. But I mean, he's like that uncle that your parents love having come around because he knows that it's fun for the kids, but they wouldn't leave you guys alone with him for too long because he's not responsible. Like,
right.
The used car salesman uncle of the family, like that's putting his girdle on and putting his black hair dye in, and him drinking the juice box in the first episode. I mean, come on, it's just it's fantastic. And getting into the lore of the book more, and talking about these different Deadites and the different strength levels, the one Deadite that was like getting into their mind and everything. I mean, come on, that's just fantastic.
And that's what it needed. It needed some sort of expansion on, instead of just repeating the same things, expand upon it. Like, where are you going to go with this? Because everything we'd seen up to that point hadn't really run the gamut of what the Deadites are, where the book came from, all these little elements were just never really even hinted at. It was just like the book is there, it's causing problems, and Ash's got to fix it. So this gave it a chance to really say, okay, well, where does this come from? And how can we expand upon that? So a very smart idea.
And it drives me crazy because I guess they had talked about, and I don't know how much of this is true. I know that they interviewed Bruce Campbell about it. I guess they were going to consider doing one more season before the show got canceled.
That was my understanding of it as well.
And it was going to be a very different season. They were going to, like, fast forward a little bit. It was going to actually be that the Deadites had, like, won. And we were going to be in, like, a post-apocalyptic world.
Which is where they left us, right?
Yeah, and it was going to be like a band of survivors and the one last-ditch effort to restore the world to the way it was. Mm-hmm. And I wish that would have happened, and it drives me crazy because the show was still doing really well. And I'm not sure... I know it was a bunch of random things that caused the cancellation, but when the show got canceled, I guess it was still doing really well, so...
To my understanding, it was a decision that came down to Starz. They pulled the plug for whatever reason. They thought the show was just not doing as well as they wanted it to, so they were just like, eh. So, yeah, it's frustrating that they weren't able to possibly shop it around, and maybe this was... Well, wasn't even that long ago, though, so I feel like they could have pulled that off. Maybe found it a home on a streaming platform. I know that's more common today than, I guess, when that was first originally airing, but still, wasn't that long ago.
No, and it's crazy, too, because there was a petition going around for quite a while about getting it brought back for at least one more season, and a bunch of people signed this petition, and they wanted to have, even if it was on a different network, just bring it back for one last season. But I know that when Bruce Campbell talked about it, he was like, I'm not as young as I used to be, and he said, I enjoyed what I did. He said, but it really kicked my ass.
Yeah.
All of the stunts and everything else. He's like, yes, I had a stunt man. He's like, but even the stuff that I did, he was like, it was a lot. And I mean, I understand it. I think Bruce Campbell's like 60, 62, 63, maybe somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. And I get it. I mean, I remember that I was rewatching the series when the interview about that came out, and him talking about being tired, being kind of tired and everything. And it was the episode where his car got possessed, which was just cool because it gave me Christine vibes. But watching all the stunts and everything that happened in that episode, I'm just like, it's no wonder you were exhausted and everything. Even if you did one or two of these stunts, I can only imagine.
Sure.
It's like crazy. And speaking of stunts, I saw a thing the other day. It said that they should have a category at the Oscars for stuntmen.
I agree.
And,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I watched the stunt. They showed a stunt, and then they said that, and I'm like, after watching that, yes, they definitely should. But,
of course, at this point, I'm sure Tom Cruise would win them all, since he's doing all his crazy Mission Impossible stunts, jumping off cliffs and shit on a motorcycle.
Well, that boils down to, should we give him a Academy Award for being a stuntman or for just being batshit crazy? Just saying.
Just saying. I agree.
But speaking of series, I didn't know if you had seen this. I know Bruce Campbell's talked about coming back as Ash if Sam Raimi were to be at the helm. There's been like speculation of that. But they've also talked about giving us some closure for Ash vs. Evil Dead through an animated series.
I did hear that, and I would be all for it, just for that closure.
Yeah.
Because I can live with that ending to a point where it's just like, okay. But it just feels like you're robbing Ash of any kind of happy ending, if you would call it that. Because, yeah, he may be kind of a jerk, and he may have his faults. But at the end of the day, you want him to succeed. Even where they kind of left him, he had a daughter. He had friends. I felt like he deserved a little bit of closure, growth, a happy ending. So if they want to do that through an animated series, absolutely. Even if it's just an animated movie just to tie it all up, I don't give a damn. Finish it.
I would really like to see if they were to do an animated series or something. I know Netflix gets a lot of hate, but Netflix does have a series that I guess they're going to do another spin-off of. They did the Castlevania series, on Netflix. I don't know if you got the chance to watch that or
We
not.
got through half of it, and I don't know why we kept hitting the brakes on it. So I guess we just need to get back around to it.
They've got Malcolm McDowell, I think. He does one of the voices in it.
Mm-hmm.
He turns out to be like a really major part of it, but I love the art style of that.
Yeah.
And I think if there was an Evil Dead series like that, like there's one of two ways I think that they should go if they do an Evil Dead animated series. They should either do like really high quality animation, like the Castlevania stuff, or like certain animes, like something really, really high quality, or do a 180 and give us a Scooby-Doo style Bruce Campbell, like one way or the other.
That would be pretty funny.
Like I don't think there's an in between.
No. I do want to talk about this since we're talking about some of the goofier elements to it. So
Yeah.
I can't think of another franchise, and I honestly think I know why it kind of works in this way. So we talk about the darkest point being the original film and how they're, and in my opinion, could not find a moment of levity in the entire film. It's just dark horror, what have you. And then you go to the opposite end of the spectrum. We'll go to Ash vs. Evil Dead, which does play more horror than comedy, but still has the dark comedy elements. And we saw some ridiculous shit in that series, like the puppet Ash, and what was it? There was an ass monster or some shit like that, or am I thinking of something? I know there was something that was just completely outlandish in that.
There was one where they were in the morgue.
Yeah. Oh, he got his head stuck up someone's ass or something like that.
And there's like a dick hanging down, hitting him. He's like trying to get it away from him.
That's what I'm remembering. So you had these really absurd situations that it's funny and horrific all at the same time. So you have this. I mean, they're two opposite ends of the spectrum. If you look at the first movie and you look at Ash vs. Evil Dead, you're like, how the fuck did you wind up here from that? But if you really look at it, Evil Dead 2 and Ash, or just Army of Darkness, I don't know, I was wanting to say Ash versus, because that was the name of the movie, technically, Ash versus the Army of Darkness, if you take a look, or Bruce Campbell versus the Army of Darkness. That's what they did in the opening credits. Anyway, it's almost as if, and I have no idea if that was his intention, Sam Raimi, but you kind of did the soft reboot in Evil Dead 2, which added those elements. So it's like they slowly transitioned to the, sillier, goofier stuff. So with Evil Dead 2, you have this middle ground. You're doing something completely horrendous and bloody and vicious, but you also have that ridiculousness of just the Deadites fucking with him. You have the comedic moments. You see the torture that Sam put Bruce through, smashing plates across his head and throwing himself around and whatnot. All that stuff. And it's funny and horror at the same time. So that felt like the proper middle ground, almost to say this is setting the stage for everything going forward. And I still feel like it's a proper sequel in so far as to say that if you're to watch 1 and 2 back to back, there's a certain point that part 2 just kind of recaps everything real quick. And then you get to the end of part 1 and that one scene in part 2 where he gets thrown through the woods by the Deadite or the unseen Deadite. So that could be kind of where you're picking up from. Granted, it removes certain elements, but that's just a way to look at it, if you want to say as a proper sequel. But then you get into those goofier elements, and then they just take it a step further in Army of Darkness to where it's a bit more, like you said, kind of an action comedy, not necessarily horror, because it's not really a horror element to Army of Darkness. And I don't mean that as a slight to the film, but it really does stand as more of an action adventure with horror elements. So, I mean, I don't even see it as a horror movie per se. You know what I mean? In fact, I personally don't feel that it deserved an R rating. I feel like it's very PG-13 in a lot of ways.
I'd agree with you there. I think to me it felt like the best way I can describe it, it kind of felt like it was an action film that just had horror characters dropped in it.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be like Rambo if you put Jason in it.
Sure, yeah.
Like
Boy,
that's
wouldn't that
how
be a face off there.
that would
wanna
be
think about
interesting to
that.
see.
Hmm.
But that's how I've always felt. It's like it'd be the same thing as Rocky Balboa boxing Freddy Krueger. Like it's a horror character, but they're in they're in a movie that's not exactly horror. Like,
See, now
but
I
it
wanna
works
see,
for me.
I want to see these crossovers, but wouldn't Jason actually be the one boxing Rocky because he already fought that one boxer and then punched his head off? So would he do that to Rocky too, or
We
would
want to
he...
make it a little. We want to make it a little easier for Rocky. So
Sure,
if Freddy versus Jason proved anything, it's Freddy's pretty quick. So
it's true. That's true. But it would be more interesting if he was being hunted by Rambo because it's like, someone, we need your help, and it's like, I'll be helping you. And then it's just like, it's this guy with the hockey mask, help us. He's like, all right. And then he like tries to lure him to his house, and then he's got all the bunkers and traps and stuff. That's from the last one if you haven't watched it. But it doesn't matter. I want to see Rambo versus Jason. This is a movie I've got to see now.
it'd be the one time we'd hear Jason talk because Rambo would be. Jason just lift his mask like, what?
Just have him tilt his head. He's like, I'm coming for you. Huh? Sorry.
Oh man.
No, I like Stallone. You know, he's good. You know, if he was to do in like in a horror movie, you know, like Rambo, like. Okay, sorry. Anyway, yeah, Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness really set the stage, and I'm almost inclined to believe that Raimi knew where he wanted the film to be, like the I guess fine line of horror and comedy. And that's why he kind of went back a little ways and said, all right, well, let's do part 2, kind of a soft reboot, kind of get back to basics, but then we can kind of really set the stage on what we want it to be.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that's where everything kind of goes forward. There are elements, I think, that they kind of use in Ash vs. Evil Dead, where you kind of see that they're pulling from some of the other films, even though, and this is what aggravates me, but I understand this is why studios need to stay out of stuff, because Universal technically owns Army of Darkness, so that's why they teetered this line in Ash vs. Evil Dead where they didn't quite touch on it, and they were just kind of like, can we talk about it? Can we not? We'll just slightly reference it, and in passing, so you're never 100% sure if it did or didn't happen. And it's just like, but it did. I know it did because I saw it, and he's got his little hand now, and so there, it happened, but they barely reference it, and it's just so frustrating.
Right.
But
that's studios for you.
Yeah, it's absolutely. Why? I mean, it's one damn movie. You couldn't just ease up and just be like, yeah, go ahead, use whatever. It's just this Universal. That's what they are. Okay, I'm gonna say this just because I'm starting to see a pattern here. Universal likes to hold on to shit that they're never gonna use, and they just do it out of spite. Because they do the same thing with the Incredible Hulk. They own the rights to that, and what do? It's just like, well, yeah, I guess you can use movie characters and whatnot, Marvel being them, but they're like, but we're not gonna make a movie. So if you want to make another movie, too bad, we're not gonna let you. But you can use the characters, it's fine.
Yep.
Like, why? Why? Just, you're not doing anything with it. Just let it go. You're like,
And it boils down to it's all about the money. I'm sure they're like, yeah, you can use it, but you have to give us some god-awful amount.
Yeah.
Which is just ridiculous on its own. I mean...
But see, that raises a question, too. Like, so, I just bear with us for a second. So, Lionsgate, to my understanding, are the distributors of everything outside of Army of Darkness. So if Evil Dead 1, 2, Ash vs. Evil Dead, that whole groovy collection that they released not that long ago, that was all Lionsgate was the distributor of that. Now they're more independent, so therefore the rights could still be owned by Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, Robert Tapert. So Renaissance Pictures, I guess, I think that's their name of their production company. So they could still own that. They're just using Lionsgate as a distributor. Now, we come back to Universal. Army of Darkness has been released on Blu-ray 4K through Shout Factory. Universal has not put out any version of their own for God knows how long. So if they're distributing via Shout Factory, clearly they don't give a shit about doing it themselves because it's not their release. So how does that work? Are you licensing them to release this? And I don't know. I'm confused by this whole thing because, again, they're not doing anything with it. Let it go. Just give it back and let them have the rights to it, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Right.
It's just one damn movie. It's not a whole franchise you own.
Well, it's the same issue with Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th right now, they're so divided on who owns what that with Nightmare on Elm Street, nobody knows who to submit ideas to, which is crazy. And Friday the 13th, they're talking about doing a new film, but it can't include a version of Jason that we all know. Otherwise, they're going to get sued.
Which doesn't make sense. How does that work?
They own the rights. I can't remember. It's one particular. He owns the rights to the original story.
You're talking about Victor Miller, yeah.
I believe, yeah, he owns the rights to the original story of Friday the 13th and a Killer. But if he wanted to make a movie about a camp killer and call it Friday the 13th, he could do that. But we can't have our version of Jason that we are used to.
But that also goes both ways, because they can use the Jason we know, the other side.
But they can't use the story from the
they can't
original.
Use the element. See, that's...
It's just like the Nightmare on Elm Street stuff. The rights for the original Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger belongs to Wes Craven's estate now. But the other films and stuff are still under New Line. So it's like, well, what are we going to get out of this? It's like, none of it really makes sense. And, I would love for them to, even at this point in time, Freddy got his power from the Dream People. Okay? Is Freddy the first person who got powers from the Dream People? Is he the only person who's ever gotten powers? Maybe tell a different story.
Sure.
It's just like bringing it back to the topic of Evil Dead. That's another thing that I think works for Evil Dead really well. It doesn't just affect one person. It doesn't just follow one person. It's not stuck at one place.
Yeah.
The book can affect anyone who reads from it, anyone who listens to the recording. They can be affected by the book. So many different stories can be told all over the place. They could do a series of Evil Dead where they talk about the book affecting different places, different people. Could you tie it all in at the end? Maybe. Do you have to? No.
See, and that's what I'm very curious to see about Evil Dead Rise, is because they from what I've heard, mind you, now granted I haven't seen it, but from what I've heard, there are elements in it that speak to it being a sequel in some aspects, as if it has ties, like you could kind of start pinning stuff together. But then the book itself is different. But is it the same book, or has it just changed forms? Is there another book? Little elements like that. So that poses another question. And I'm like you. I think it would be fascinating if you wanted to just find different tales of people being possessed by it. I think a series would be a great idea. You think about that through the lens of like the Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt, something like that. So each episode, or you could do a season, doesn't matter, just however long your story needs to take to tell, but it's about those who are affected by the Necronomicon. So you have similar elements with the Deadites in the book and whatnot, but you have different people involved, and change the set, like you said, change it up, just the settings. So we go from a high rise, we've done the cabin. Where else could you go? The world is your oyster.
I have something. And I want your thought on this, because I was just thinking about this for some reason. I think it would be interesting to do an Evil Dead. Like you said, there could be more books. There could be more than one book. Doesn't even have to necessarily be the Necronomicon. It could be another version of the Necronomicon.
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting if we were in like a setting where, let's say, there's a missionary set up.
Okay.
And there's a tribe, and they think the tribe is just hostile. People are out in the middle of nowhere. And the tribe has read from the book, and it is a tribe of Deadites.
Ooh.
There could also wild animals out there, because I think if I remember right, they've made reference to animals and stuff. Maybe if it was even just in Ash vs. Evil Dead.
That's what I was trying to remember. I feel like the
Deadites can attach to like anything.
Mm-hmm.
I know they like to attach to deer heads hanging on the wall. So, but I think that would be interesting, because it'd be a different setting instead of a cabin in the woods or a high rise, or the rainforest or something like that.
Yeah.
And they just think, and you don't even have to hint at it at the beginning of the movie. Just make people think it's a violent tribe. There's plenty of films like that.
Sure.
But then you find out maybe at the end they have someone tied to a stone or something, and the high priestess or whatever comes out and, you can't really see their face because their face is like covered or something, and all of a sudden they hold up the book, and the book, and they peel their mask away, and you see those dead-eyed eyes, and they just smile, and then the screen cuts to black, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Just saying.
No, I mean, it's an interesting take on it. I mean, I was even thinking kind of in the vein of, what was it? The name of that damn movie? The Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah.
So you have the element of that with the Evil Dead, maybe even the film crew, like they're trying to film something, and, ooh, that could be
Do it as a
very
found
interesting.
footage.
Yeah. See, we got ideas.
See, I was thinking Cannibal Holocaust and Green Inferno.
Green Inferno. That's another one I was thinking of.
I'm telling you, I think that would be, because it has to be happening in other places.
Sure,
I would think. And it would make sense that it would be happening in some remote places because it's not all over the place.
Yeah.
So, and on a random note real quick, Evil Dead Rise, for anyone out there, I believe it was the director of it, he tweeted out, Bruce Campbell is in the movie, just not in the sense that you think. And if you can find him and you tweet the director and let him know that you found him and where you found him, he'll send you $20.
Yeah. I'm down to take that challenge. Now,
Right.
I feel whatever he's talking about is obscure. Obscure enough that he feels confident that he's got it hidden somewhere that you're never going to think about, you're never going to look at. So I feel like you have to really dig to find this hidden Bruce, and it's not going to be as obvious as like a poster on the wall or him on the television. I feel confident in that it's going to be something a little bit more obscure that you're not going to be thinking about.
I think it'll be like an apartment number or something like that. Or if they do decide to make reference to Army of Darkness, maybe see a sword or something somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, there are subtle Easter eggs in the original Evil Dead and in all of the Evil Deads for other movies. There's a Freddy glove hanging in the shed in one of them.
Yeah.
I think there's a Jason mask maybe in one of them, if I remember right, or a machete or something. But then again,
I remember there being some sort of, oh, come on. There was a poster, and it was almost like that it was a direct reference to another movie. Ah, damn, I can't remember. Because there was a poster on the wall, and it was like that was calling back to something that they were a fan of.
I do know what you're talking about. Yeah, I can't think of it
And
either.
then I'm almost positive that they kind of did a flip-flop. So it was like whatever the film that they were referencing or had a poster up for, the sequel to that film had a poster of the Evil Dead shown in it.
So they did the same thing.
Yeah. God damn it. What was I can't remember the movie.
And just so everybody knows, Jason from Friday the 13th is technically a Deadite. Jason Goes to Hell, I believe it was. The director of that said, yeah, we were trying to hint at that. And I don't know if, I'm sure, I think you and I might have sent this back and forth to each other. The original ending that they had planned for Jason Goes to Hell, he was going to transform into a monster at the end. Yeah. That would have been so interesting to see. That would have taken Friday the 13th a whole different direction.
For sure.
And he looked like a Deadite. He did.
Yeah, there was that one shot that I'm almost positive the deleted scene is out there somewhere, but
yeah, it is.
I know you can see the shot in the movie or in the trailer where you see like the big demon face or what have you, and yeah, that would have been interesting. I'm obsessed with this poster, by the way, because I know it's driving me mad because I know it was something very interesting and it's just gonna drive me nuts. Anyways, trying to think of some other stuff that'd be worth talking about. We could talk about the Ted Raimi, for example.
Yeah.
So where he played Henrietta in part 2, the effects work on that. I mean, if you know who he is, if you've seen Ted Raimi in real life, just knowing he is Henrietta is bizarre. You know, the makeup work that they did is phenomenal, and just even the voice that he does. That's another one of those things that I don't think we've really touched on with the series is when they do these distorted voices for the Deadites, how unnerving that can be because they'll hit these different pitches. Like one memory I have of watching Evil Dead one time. I think it was one of the first times that I actually had it on DVD. Like, I just bought it on DVD. And, of course, this was like years ago. And I was watching it, and it was late. Like, I was literally watching it as a late night movie. So it was like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning when it was ending. The house was dark. The atmosphere was just unsettling. And then, of course, at the end, when they're just melting their faces and stuff like that, it was just... Definitely watch that shit at night or late night, because it'll unnerve you just a bit.
I think I found what you were talking about.
Okay.
I'm going to read this real quick.
All right.
This is from Collective World.
Okay.
It's about some Easter eggs in Evil Dead. A nod to Wes Craven hidden in the background of the Evil Dead. While you're watching Ash flip through the book at around 15 minutes, you may have missed that Easter egg tacked onto the wall behind the desk. While the bottom half torn off of Papa Jupiter's face missing, the poster for The Hills Have Eyes hangs
as soon
in
as you
tatters.
started saying it, it hit me. Yes, that's it. And then it was in the remake of The Hills Have Eyes that they had an Evil Dead poster, I think in the in one of the rooms in the RV or whatever. I'm almost positive it was something like that, as kind of paying homage back to
And
Sam Raimi.
Wes Craven actually pays respect to Sam Raimi in Nightmare on Elm Street, because when Nancy's trying to stay awake, on her TV, The Evil Dead is on.
And that could be it, too, that I'm thinking of. Okay, well, anyway, yeah, Hills Have Eyes. That was it. Damn
There
it,
you go.
Yes. As soon as you started saying it, it was just like, there it is. Damn it. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I saw it, and I was like, I gotta tell him.
But yeah, the whole Deadite designs that they've done, even in part 3. Now, I do want to talk about this. So, since we're talking about Army of Darkness, this is a movie that is fascinating to me on so many levels because of the director's cut that exists for this film. Now, if you go to Shout Factory, Scream Factory, whatever, they have the director's cut. They have this set now where it's the original versions on 4K. You still got the director's cut, international cuts, and what have you. I've only watched the original and the director's cut. I haven't watched the international cut, and I'm not really 100% sure what they've tweaked on that. But for me, and I really wish they would find some way to combine, make like an ultimate cut of the film. For me, the director's cut is the superior cut, hands down. However, in watching the director's cut, you get the director's cut ending, which does not mesh with the way the story goes forward. So I wish you could take and combine all the extra footage that they removed from the original film, which I do not understand for the life of me. This had to be studio interference, telling them to trim it down. Because the movie is so much better, so much more fleshed out in the director's cut because of certain scenes that they kept in. And the ending needs to be the ending to the theatrical cut, because that's where we kind of left him, technically, by canon at this point. So I wish there was some way I could get some ultimate cut that mishmashes both versions to make this perfect movie, because I truly enjoy the director's cut more. But that ending just doesn't work because we know where he winds up. So it's I don't know, it's a hard, when you're coming to choose which one you want to watch, you want to see the one that's more fleshed out, but you don't want to be left with that ending. It's like, what could have been? Which makes sense for Ash, because, he would be that idiot to fuck up something so simple. And I guess they do kind of pay homage to that in the theatrical cut in some ways, but it just seems funnier that he would have screwed it up so bad that he didn't even wind up where he belonged.
Yeah. That was actually, they did a comic a while ago. It was Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. Mm-hmm. And that's actually how Ash ended up there. He said something wrong. He messed the littlest thing up, and he ended up there. And
that would have been cool.
And they actually, they've interviewed, I believe Kane Hodder said the same thing. Don't quote me on it. I believe that they've asked Kane Hodder and Robert Englund about Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. But I do know Robert Englund said that he had wished that could have happened, because he said that would have been the ultimate way for Freddy to get killed off. Ash using the Necronomicon to kill off Freddy for good.
Yeah.
He said that would have been a cool way to go, he said, and I would have thought that would have been just awesome. And I thought about that. And I'm like, man, that really would have been really cool.
The what if scenarios, man. I hate that they couldn't get that sorted out, because it really sounded like it was an active development for quite some time. Like it was seriously being pushed. It was not rumors. It was like, well, how could we make this happen? And no doubt it had to do with studio interference, or certain studios not want to work together, because New Line had 2 out of the 3. They just need to secure Ash. Yeah. And I don't see how they couldn't have, unless it was hinging on Universal having some sort of hold on that.
Yeah.
But they got around it. I don't see how.
See, that's where I feel like studio, like, I'm not going to touch on this like a lot, but I feel like as an artist, when you make a deal with a studio, kind of do what Sam Raimi did and really hold your own and say, look, I want to own this. I want you to distribute it, but I want to own it. Mm-hmm. Because it can happen. I mean, look at the podcasting stuff. Joe Rogan, he has his podcast with Spotify now, but Spotify does not own his podcast.
Yeah.
He owns it. And I feel like more creatives are going to have to start doing that. And I feel like that's what people who write and direct and do films, I feel like that's why independent filmmakers are becoming more prominent. It's because they don't have to listen to the studio. Yeah, it's harder to get your films made that way. It might not be as prolific. It might not make you as wealthy, but nobody can tell you what you can and can't do with your projects. Look at Terrifier 2. Look at that success story. I mean, that's insane. And, I met the writer, director, makeup art. I mean, that guy does everything. He does everything. And, he didn't let anybody tell him what he could or couldn't do. Mm-hmm. And he made a film, and he took some extremes, but he created an icon. Sure. And I honestly think that's what Sam Raimi did. But, I remember we talked to Lloyd when we interviewed him. I know he said something that I know you had mentioned it in the interview, that it really made you think. It really struck a chord with you. I didn't really talk that much about it at the time, but in a way, it really did strike a chord with me too. Do you want to go your own way and do what you love, or do you want the red carpet, or do you want to walk your own direction? Mm-hmm. And I feel like Sam Raimi sort of figured out a way to do both.
Sure.
He's done a lot of successful films. He's been on the red carpet. He's done a lot of big work, but he's also stayed pretty damn true to himself. Mm-hmm. It is possible. I'm sure it's not an easy road, but he did it. And that's just, it's phenomenal. And I know Evil Dead's been good to him, because when I watch other films of his, aside from a few, I get Evil Dead vibes. And like I said, I think that's why Drag Me to Hell took me a minute to appreciate, because I felt like it was trying to be Evil Dead.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any Deadites, and that really bothered me. But when I took a minute and I was like, this is a different kind of film. I know it's Sam Raimi, but it's a different kind of film. It made me appreciate it more. But I mean, even looking at the original Spider-Man films, you might not realize it watching it, but there are some Evil Dead elements to it if you really think about it. Especially with Green Goblin, they made him terrifying. I mean, he seemed like a demon to me. The
mask is one of those oddities that it doesn't work sometimes, but if you hit it just right, in the right light, the right angle, it's pretty freaky.
And I mean, look at it even today. They brought back Willem Dafoe to play Green Goblin again, and it is in part, it's a huge part of it is the fact that Willem Dafoe is just a badass. Let's just put that out there right now. He's a badass, but Sam Raimi created something phenomenal.
Yeah.
And he gave Willem Dafoe the tools to make that character just scary. And it translated really well over. Multiverse of Madness has a lot of Evil Dead and a lot of horror elements to it, but it works. So
hell, even look at Spider-Man 2, the scene where Doc Ock's in the operating room. That was a straight homage to Evil Dead. The entire scene.
Oh yes, and even the emotional aspects of that film and everything, those films had heart. And yes, Evil Dead itself is a horror movie. It has comedy. It has comedy, it has action aspects, but at the end of the day, even though Ash can be a little skeezy sometimes or a little forgetful or goofy, he has a lot of heart. And I know that Sam Raimi wrote him that way, but I also think that Bruce Campbell as just a human being has a lot of heart, and Sam Raimi as a human being have a lot of heart. And I think that they were just two buddies making movies together, and the fun that they had translated onto the screen, and the love and respect that they had for each other also translated onto the screen. Because for the films being a violent subject, that's very much the case. There's a lot of heart there, and the characters have withstood the test of time because of that. So,
no, it's definitely an amazing, interesting road that it's taken, and I wish it was a little bit more consistent, because you asked the questions of what could have been if they would have just been able to do the things, but there's always somebody who has to come and fuck it up, and I'm talking about studios, I'm talking about executives, because they don't want to spend the money, but you spend money on garbage. I'm not going to get into it. Anyway.
just a little thing to add just real quick on that subject, just real quick. You got to spend money to make money. Look at how much they spent on the last Avenger films, and look at how much those made. Just putting that out there. But as you were saying.
No, I don't really have much else to say about the franchise. I mean, it's a solid franchise that I don't really feel has any weak links.
No.
I mean, this is one of those franchises that, despite having a few missteps, and missteps meaning that we get Ash vs. Evil Dead gets canceled, or we don't get the proper sequel to Army of Darkness like we could have had in some ways, and it took forever to get there. Again, I don't blame Sam Raimi or Bruce Campbell. I blame those who got in their way from doing the thing that they wanted to do. So the what ifs are interesting, but the fact that every entry is solid in its own way, and does sound like that Evil Dead Rise is going to continue that trend, because I have not heard anything bad about it up to now. Granted, it's still not released, or at least not released when this comes out. You may be listening to it a month from now and be like, oh yeah, that movie did come out, didn't it? So it may be out and it may suck. I don't know. But from what I've heard thus far, it's a solid entry that pays homage where it belongs and also does its own thing. So I'm looking forward to it. And one other thing that we have to bring up that we have not mentioned, which is a staple, and not just Evil Dead films, but Sam Raimi films in general, is the 1973 Oldsmobile Delta 88, which is just his car that you will see in every film. So if that doesn't make an appearance, now granted, I know that's not technically his movie he directed, but it's an Evil Dead movie, so why not throw it in there? Just let it be parked on the street somewhere. Why not?
I think the guys doing it will do justice. I'm sure it'll be in there somewhere.
I hope so. But no, go check out the Evil Dead franchise. If you've never seen any of them, do yourself a favor and go check one out. If you want something more horror, I would say check out one of the newer, the remake or the original. If you're looking for something a little bit more slapsticky, go somewhere in the middle. Check out Evil Dead 2 or Army of Darkness or Ash vs. Evil Dead. There's not a lot of options, but there's a lot of goodness within those options. So I highly recommend it. Anything else you want to add?
You know, I think we summed it up pretty damn well today.
Okay.
I even thought about it, and my farewell to everyone today is going to be a little bit different because of the subject matter. But if you don't have anything, I'll let you do your thing, and we'll let the people go.
Well, Ramblers, let us know how you feel about the Evil Dead franchise. What's your favorite entry? That's going to be our poll question for today. So you can let us know that over on Spotify. But if you just want to hit us up on Twitter at Horror Ramblings, you can do that too. If you've got more to say, a tweet's just not going to cut it. Email us at horrorramblings@gmail.com. I'm looking forward to your emails. We'll read them out on the show. We'll make an entire segment. If someone just wants to write us an email, it can be about anything. If you just want to express your feelings, it could just be the most random email imaginable. We will read it out on the show. You just have to send us an email. And if you want to discuss horror with like-minded individuals, join our Facebook group. We have fun over there all the time, sharing whatever news I can remember to share, or trivia bits, whatever. You can also join us in our Ramblers room on Discord, where we do similar things. You can even find us on Instagram to see an assortment of horror images. I did good this week too. There were Puppet Master images over the past week. And then you'll probably see Evil Dead images this week, maybe. If you're feeling generous, you want to support the show financially, you can head on over to patreon.com/pencil-and-paper-productions and chuck in $1. And leave a review on your favorite podcasting app. Do it over on Good Pods. That seems to be where we're shining now. So go over to Good Pods, show them they're helping indie podcasters like us, helping us grow. So you go over there and just like. And then if you're also a podcaster, we'll check out your stuff and like it too. I appreciate anybody who's liked anything that we've done thus far. You know who you are. I would have your names in front of me at the moment, but I'm sorry, I forgot to do that. But next week, how about that? Like I said, Spotify, weekly questions polls. This week's will be, what's your favorite Evil Dead entry? And finally, if you just prefer a central hub, keep up with all things over at pencilpaperproductions.com/horror-ramblings. Links are in the show notes for your convenience.
And remember, guys, stay groovy.
Oh, swallow your soul.
This has been the Horror Ramblings Podcast. Join us next time for even more.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.